Welcome to Silent Revenge, where betrayal doesn't just break you, it changes everything. What happened to me that night, in that crowded ballroom, made me question every choice I ever trusted. I never imagined a simple question could feel like a punch to the chest. Yet when the older security guard approached me outside the Meridian Grand Hotel, his voice low, deliberate, it did. "Is that your wife?" he asked. I froze. My pen hovered over the catering receipt. My mind raced. "Yeah, that's my wife," I managed to say, trying to sound calm. But calm was gone the second I looked through the glass doors. Alara, my wife, my partner of 7 years, was laughing with a man I didn't recognize, laughing like I didn't exist. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, and my stomach dropped. The guard leaned in closer, whispering like a confessor. "You need to see this." Inside the ballroom, the chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors, casting a golden glow over what should have been our night, our launch party for Etherwell, her new wellness startup. I had invested everything, my savings, my mother's inheritance, the equity I'd spent 15 years building. I believed in her. I believed in us. But the guard's tone carried a weight that I couldn't ignore. "She's brought him here before," he murmured. "And he booked the penthouse suite under her name." I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse spike. The laughter inside wasn't just noise, it was a reminder. A reminder that trust can vanish in a single glance. That betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles subtly just out of reach. Alara raised her glass to the crowd. "My biggest supporter," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "The man who made all this possible." She glanced at him, not me. My chest tightened. Something inside me shifted. Betrayal, I realized, isn't violent. It's surgical, personal, humiliating, and it leaves a mark you carry silently, planning your next move while the world stays oblivious. The guard's eyes met mine one last time. "You need to see this," he repeated. And in that moment, I understood the first rule of betrayal. It's never about what you see. It's about what you choose to discover next. I didn't move. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay calm. The ballroom shimmered behind the glass, full of people oblivious to the storm building in my chest. The guard D. Harper shifted uneasily. "Sir, I don't usually interfere," he said quietly. "But she's been sneaking him in here all month. Always the same time. Always the same private meetings. I checked the cameras. You need to see it." I swallowed. My mind raced through every conversation, every late night, every business trip she'd taken. Something didn't add up. Something never had. I followed him down the quiet service hallway, the echoes of my shoes sounding louder than the music inside. My pulse was deafening. Questions collated. Why would she hide him? Why now? Why in our own celebration? Harper pulled out his phone. The footage played in dim light. There she was, Alara, leaning close, laughing, whispering, her hand on his shoulder, a brush of fingers across his chest that should have been mine. She looked happy. Not just happy. Intimate. And every word she spoke sounded like a lie I had believed for years. I felt bile rise. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite the low tone. "Lead investor," Harper replied. "And he's not just investing. She's giving him control. Over everything. Your equity, your shares, your investment, all of it." I couldn't breathe. My life, the business I built from nothing, the trust I gave blindly, it was slipping through my fingers like sand. I thought of the nights we argued over money, the promises she made, the plans she swore we shared. And now, in a single flicker on a phone screen, I saw the truth. She had been planning this behind my back the entire time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run in and confront her, right there under the chandeliers. But the rational part of me, the part that survived this long whispered patience, observation, strategy. Because betrayal, I realized, isn't always a slap. Sometimes, it's a trap laid so carefully you walk right into it yourself. I turned to Harper. "How long?" "Weeks," he said. "Maybe months. You need to decide what to do next. But watch carefully. Don't rush." And in that moment, I understood something fundamental about trust once broken. It forces you to question every memory, every smile, every word. The hallway was silent, except for my heartbeat. And I knew with a clarity that chilled me, that my next move would change everything, for both of us. I couldn't stop staring at the footage. Each laugh, each glance, each subtle touch, it felt like shards of glass piercing my chest. The world outside that hallway disappeared. I was trapped in a loop of disbelief, fury, and a hollow ache that I didn't know how to name. Alara, my Alara. 7 years. Every plan, every promise, every shared dream, and it was all a facade. I had trusted her completely, and she had dismantled that trust silently, meticulously, like a surgeon. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. How could she do this? I whispered to no one. Was I ever enough? Did she ever care at all? Harper watched me quietly, his gaze sympathetic but firm. Betrayal like this, he said softly, it's not about love or loyalty, it's about control. And she's already taken it. His words hit harder than any insult. Control. She wasn't just cheating on me emotionally, she was hijacking my life, my investments, my future. Everything I'd built, everything I believed in, was being handed to someone else while I stood on the sidelines. I leaned against the cold concrete wall, trying to breathe. My mind raced, fragments of our life colliding like broken glass. Birthdays she forgot. Nights she claimed she was working late. Meetings she insisted I didn't need to attend. All of it now made sense. Every lie, every omission, every carefully constructed smile. Anger surged, hot and sharp, but beneath it simmered something darker clarity. I realized that panic would get me nowhere. Tears would change nothing, and confrontation without plan would be humiliation squared. I needed control back. I needed answers. And most importantly, I needed her to understand, in the sharpest possible way, that betrayal has consequences, consequences she would never forget. I studied the footage again, frame by frame, searching for leverage, for evidence, for any hint of weakness. Every smirk, every glance, every whispered word became a piece of the puzzle I didn't even know I was assembling. The hallway was silent except for my heartbeat, deafening in the stillness. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself I wouldn't let this destroy me. I would be smarter, sharper, more patient. And when the time came, the reckoning would be precise, deliberate, and unforgettable. Because betrayal, I realized, isn't just a wound. It's a lesson, one you learn at the cost of your own trust. I left the hotel that night with a single thought looping in my head: patience. Every betrayal has a crack, a weakness. I just had to find hers. I couldn't confront Alara recklessly, not yet. Not when she had already built an empire on lies. Back at my apartment, I pulled out my laptop. Every financial statement, every email, every contract related to Etherwell had to be dissected. Every detail she'd hidden, every meeting she'd orchestrated behind my back, became ammunition in my mind. I was no longer just a husband, I was an investigator in my own life. I made a list. The investors, the dates she'd traveled, the accounts she controlled, every interaction she'd had with the man in the suit. I cross-referenced them with receipts, social media posts, and hotel bookings. The patterns were subtle, but they were there, predictable. I realized the mistake I'd made for years: blind trust. I had allowed my love to make me invisible in my own life. Now, I would reclaim visibility. Every step she took, I would anticipate. Every move, I would counter. Harper had given me more than footage, he'd given me insight. Security protocols, camera access points, even who had keys to restricted areas. If I timed it right, I could be steps ahead before she even noticed my awareness. I stayed up all night mapping it out. A calendar of opportunities, weaknesses, and leverage points. I even rehearsed conversations in my head, imagining the words that would make her falter without knowing why. Every scenario, every outcome, I ran like a chess player, preparing for a checkmate that had to be perfect. Sleep came in brief, haunted bursts. Dreams of her laughter, that hidden smile, made my stomach twist. But each nightmare reinforced my resolve. Emotional pain was now a tool, not a distraction. By dawn I had a plan, not impulsive, not rash. A strategy to reclaim what she had taken: my investments, my dignity, my life. The revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be obvious. It would be meticulous, invisible, and devastating in its precision. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying and exhilarating. The most effective revenge is not anger-driven. It's intelligence applied coldly, deliberately, with patience. Because betrayal teaches a lesson, but only if you are willing to endure the pain long enough to strike back on your own terms. I watched her from a distance the next evening, a quiet observer rather than the man she thought she knew. The ballroom wasn't my battlefield yet. It was a laboratory. Every glance, every gesture, every word she spoke became data I could use. Her confidence was intoxicating and infuriating. She moved through the crowd like a queen among subjects, unaware that the man she considered blind was now fully aware, cataloging, calculating, predicting. I wasn't acting on impulse. I was orchestrating the first moves of a long game she wouldn't see coming. First, I needed leverage. I sent discreet inquiries to mutual business contacts, planning questions without revealing suspicion. A vague remark here, a subtle doubt there. I watched reactions. Whispers began to ripple through her carefully curated circle. She noticed, of course, her frown betrayed irritation, not yet fear. That would come later. Next, I infiltrated her digital world. Not with hacks or illegal methods, just patience, observation, and old-fashioned attention to detail. Password resets overlooked logins, forgotten files. Little cracks she had assumed were invisible. I collected proof, a record of her manipulations, her lies, her clandestine meetings. Every document a reminder that I wasn't powerless. I didn't confront her yet. That would be premature. Early confrontation feeds panic, desperation, or worse, recklessness. My revenge needed to feel inevitable, not reactive. I wanted her to underestimate me, to continue smiling, plotting, thinking she was untouchable. The guard Harper became my silent ally. He fed me updates, subtle observations, confirmations that my plan was on track. Each piece of information was a thread I pulled, weaving a web she wouldn't notice until it was too late. And then there was the man in the suit, Elara's lead investor. I studied him as well, his habits, his vulnerabilities, his ego. If she thought he was untouchable, I planned to prove otherwise. One misstep, one slight shift in perception, and her carefully built trust would begin to crumble from within. As I reviewed the evidence late that night, I felt an unfamiliar calm. My anger was present, yes, but it had been tempered into precision. Each calculated step brought me closer to reclaiming what she had taken. Betrayal had been humiliating. Watching her thrive in deceit had been unbearable. But the first moves were made, and in silence I understood this truth: revenge isn't chaotic. It's patient, invisible, and inevitable when executed correctly. Weeks passed, but time had a different rhythm for me now. Every meeting she attended, every business call she made, every smile she offered the world was a calculated risk I monitored. I had shifted into a silent predator, and the prey had no idea. Her confidence remained unshaken, but subtle cracks were forming, not in her demeanor, but in the world around her. Contacts I had seeded with doubt began sending private messages, inquiries about missed deadlines, inconsistencies in reports, whispers about investor dissatisfaction. Nothing blatant, nothing she could pin on me. Just enough to make her question the infallibility she so carefully projected. I escalated further. Anonymous emails carefully crafted, pointing out minor discrepancies in Etherwell's filings. Nothing illegal, nothing traceable, just enough to make her feel the walls closing in. Her panic was invisible, but I could sense it in her hurried phone calls and clipped emails. The perfect storm was building. The man in the suit became a target too. I noticed his arrogance, his reliance on Elara's influence. A single well-placed suggestion to a mutual contact, highlighting his overreach, and his credibility began to erode. He didn't suspect sabotage, he thought it was circumstance. Perfect. Harper continued to be my eyes in the field. He alerted me to an unscheduled dinner between the two of them at a private club downtown. I watched from a distance, unseen, cataloging body language, timing, every nuanced interaction. I was building a psychological map of their collusion, ready to exploit it at the perfect moment. I reminded myself daily haste was the enemy. I had been humiliated, yes, but every small, strategic move now was amplifying the eventual impact of my revenge. She would learn exactly what betrayal costs, not in confrontation, but in inevitability. By the end of the week, I had amassed enough subtle influence to begin shaking her empire without a single word spoken. The whispers were multiplying. Investors were questioning her judgment. Her man was faltering, and she still believed she was untouchable. That night, I stood alone in the apartment, staring at the city lights, thinking betrayal can make you small. But revenge makes you patient, precise, and terrifyingly unstoppable. And in that silence, I realized the truth: the deeper the betrayal, the sweeter the strategy must be. Because a carefully executed revenge is not just retaliation, it's proof that no one can humiliate you without consequence. The first cracks became visible that morning. Elara arrived at the office, radiant as always, but something in the room had shifted. Conversations that once hummed with admiration now hesitated. Investors' eyes darted nervously, whispering among themselves. She noticed it too, a twitch of panic in her smile, quickly masked with charm. I wasn't there, not physically. I didn't need to be. My work had already taken effect. Every subtle move I had planted, every carefully crafted suggestion, had begun eroding her carefully built facade. The empire she thought unassailable was wobbling, and she didn't know why. Emails came in, gently accusatory questions about numbers, timelines, missing documentation. Elera's responses were curt, defensive, just enough to show strain without admitting fault. And with each typed sentence, the perfect image she had cultivated began to fray. Her lead investor, the man who had been her shield and confidant, started to falter as well. Mutual contacts questioned his judgment. Whispers of overreach and negligence spread quietly through the network. The foundation of her power, her influence over others, was eroding faster than she could perceive. I watched it all unfold from the shadows, silent and calculating. The humiliation she had inflicted upon me, the betrayal of my trust and my life's work, was now being mirrored in her world. Only this time, it was invisible, precise, and inevitable. I imagined her in her office later that evening, reviewing the day's correspondence, realizing that the walls of control she had built were shrinking. I imagined the panic rising quietly in her chest, the kind that can't be hidden with a smile or a toast to success. And yet, I restrained myself from direct confrontation. There would be no shouting, no dramatic exposure. That would cheapen the lesson. The point wasn't to humiliate publicly. It was to make her recognize, painfully, that betrayal has consequences she cannot ignore. By the end of the week, the tension had become palpable. Colleagues whispered. The man in the suit questioned decisions he had taken for granted. And Elera. She was isolated, fragile, and beginning to understand the cost of her actions, though she still didn't know the source. Betrayal, I realized, doesn't just harm the victim. It sets in motion a chain of consequences that, if managed with precision, can become a mirror. And sometimes, the quietest, most patient revenge delivers the most profound lesson. Trust, once broken, is a liability no one should take lightly.